Our second reading comes to us from Paul's letter to the church in Philippi. A very encouraging letter. It's one of my favorites of Paul's writing, and especially this portion in the end, in chapter 4. So this is Philippians chapter 4, beginning in verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all, the Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. I didn't include it in reference, but Paul goes on to say, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. And I've learned the secret of being content in every situation. Friends, this is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Okay. The story is told many years ago that a priest was getting onto an elevator in New York City when the famed Groucho Marx was getting off. Recognizing the star, the priest said, "Sir, I want to thank you for all the joy you've brought into the world." And the comedian quickly retorted, "And to you, Father, for all the joy you've taken out of it." Now, that's an amusing way to begin. I don't know if you've ever experienced a Holy Humor Sunday, sometimes referred to as Bright Sunday. There's a variety of names, and it's not just a chance to get up here and tell jokes. It really does have some of its roots in the musings of the early church and the early church writers. Theologians like Augustine, Gregory of Nyssa, and John Chrysostom, among others, believed and wrote that God played a practical joke on the devil by raising Jesus from the dead. Risus Pascalis, the Easter laugh, the early theologians called it. The idea was that God, in fact, has the last laugh over death. Churches in the 15th century Bavaria used to celebrate the Sunday after Easter as God's joke, or Easter laugh Sunday. Priests would deliberately include amusing stories and jokes in their sermon in an attempt to make the faithful laugh. And then after the service, people would gather to play practical jokes on one another. And somewhere I read that they would pour water on the pastor. Now, Dave and I had a discussion of who's the pastor today. And in this weather, yeah, that might be the joke this year, isn't it? That it's April 8th and it still isn't paid up. It was their way in that day of playing jokes and celebrating the resurrection of Christ, the supreme joke God played on Satan. In the Orthodox tradition, still even today, people gather on Easter Monday to tell jokes and funny stories. Other traditions celebrate this on, some Presbyterian churches, believe it or not, as you look on the internet and you Google Holy Humor Sunday, it's a variety of traditions that celebrate this particular observance. In his book, Tensions, H.A. Williams writes, "Eternity had the last laugh after all. Here are Caiaphas and all his crowd, Pilate and Herod and all theirs, sitting complacently in a state of grave and dignified self-congratulation. They have done their duty and justified the authority vested in them by efficiently disposing once and for all of this dangerous fool Jesus. He's safely dead. And with solemn calm again restored, they can concentrate once more on the really serious matters to which their lives are dedicated. But behind their backs, without them having the slightest inkling of what is going on, the fool popped up again, like a jack-in-the-box, and is dancing about even more vigorously than before, and even more compellingly. People here, there, and everywhere are falling under his spell. If that isn't funny, nothing is. The resurrection is the supreme, the final, the ultimate joke. So, let's get started. I got lots of material here for us. Most of which I used this morning, but some of it might be new, you never know. A Sunday school teacher was discussing the 10 Commandments with her 5- and 6-year-olds. After explaining the commandment to honor thy father and thy mother, she asked, "Is there a commandment that teaches us how to treat our brothers and sisters?" Without missing a beat, a little boy answered, "Thou shalt not kill." A new pastor was visiting in the homes of some of his parishioners. At one house, it seemed obvious that there was somebody home, but no answer came to his repeated knocks at the door. Therefore, he took out a business card that he had printed Revelation 3:20 on it. And he stuck it in the door. When the offering was processed the following Sunday, he found that his card had been returned. Added to it was this cryptic message, Genesis 3:10. Reaching for his Bible to check out the citation, he broke up in gales of laughter. Revelation 3:20 begins, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." Genesis 3:10 reads, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid, for I was naked." A mother was giving instructions to her 3 children as she sent them to Sunday school. "And why is it necessary to be quiet in church?" Her son quickly responded, "Because people are sleeping." How about some hymn titles by profession? Anybody know what the dentist's hymn is?
Crown him with many crowns.
Oh, you got it. Crown him with many crowns. The meteorologist, that's harder to say. Hymn, "There shall be showers of blessing." The tailor's hymn, "Holy, holy, holy." The golfer's hymn, here's one from Masters Weekend. The golfer's hymn, "There's a green hill far away." The politician's hymn, "Standing on Promises." The IRS agent's hymn, "I surrender all." The gossiper's hymn, "Pass it on." And for those who speed on the highway, here's a few hymns for you. Going 45 miles an hour, your hymn is, "God will take care of you." 65, "Nearer, my God, to thee." 85, "This world is not my home." 95, "Lord, I'm coming home." And 100 miles per hour, "Precious Memories." A woman invited some people to dinner, and at the table, she turned to her 6-year-old daughter and said, "Would you like to say the blessing?" "I wouldn't know what to say," the little girl replied. "Just say what you hear Mommy say," the mother said. The little girl bowed her head and said, "Dear Lord, why on earth did I invite these people to dinner?" Here's one for you. A confirmation student was asked to list the 10 Commandments in any order. He wrote 3, 6, 1, 8, 5, 9. Took that one a little literally. cop pulled over a car and approached the driver, who was a nun. "Why were you only driving 23 miles per hour on the highway?" he asked. "Well, the sign said 23 miles per hour," she said. "No, that sign said Highway 23. That's not the speed limit." Then, looking at the other nuns in the car, he asked, "Why do they look so shaken up?" "Well, we just exited Interstate 196. Out of the mouth of babes, some letters to God from children. Dear God, is it true my father won't get in heaven if he uses his bowling words in the house? Dear God, thank you for the baby brother, but what I prayed for was a puppy. Dear God, if we come back as something, please don't let me be Jennifer Horton. I hate her. Dear God, maybe Cain and Abel would not kill each other so much if they had their own rooms. It works with my brother. Dear God, I bet it is very hard for you to love all of everybody in the whole world. There are only 4 people in my family, and I can hardly do it. It's not so funny as it is touching. Dear God, I didn't think orange went with purple until I saw the sunset you made on Tuesday. That was cool. For all of us animal lovers, Adam and Eve said, Lord, when we were in the garden, you walked with us every day. Now we do not see you anymore. We are lonesome, and it's difficult for us to remember how much you love us. And God said, I will create a companion for you, so that you will know love even when you cannot see me. No matter how selfish or childish you behave, this new companion will accept you as you are and will love you as I do. And so God created a new animal to be a companion for Adam and Eve, and it was a very good animal, and God was pleased. The new animal was very happy to be with Adam and Eve, and wagged its tail. Adam said, Lord, I have named all the animals in the kingdom, but I cannot think of a fitting name for this new animal. God said, the new animal is a reflection of my love for you, so its name will be a reflection of my own name, and you will call it Dog. Dog lived with Adam and Eve and was a companion to them and loved them. Adam and Eve were comforted, and God was pleased. And Dog was content and wagged his tail, but it came to pass. Then an angel came to the Lord and said, Lord, Adam and Eve have become filled with pride. They strut and preen like peacocks, and they believe that they are worthy of complete adoration. Dog has indeed taught them that they are loved, but perhaps too well. God said, I will create for them another companion who will be with them and will see them just as they are. This companion will remind them of their limitations, and they will know that they are not always worthy of adoration. And God created cats to be a companion to Adam and Eve. And cat would not obey Adam and Eve. And cat flicked its tail in indignation. When Adam and Eve looked into cat's eyes, they were always reminded that they were not the supreme beings. In time, Adam and Eve learned humility, and their character greatly improved. They learned to appreciate all the wonders of the world, and they became more worthy of God's love. And God was very pleased with his newest creation. And the dog was happy too. And cat really couldn't care one way or the other. I love cats too. Okay, just a couple more. Here's a pun for you. There was a Scottish tradesman, a painter called Jack, who was very interested in making a pound very good. So often he would thin down his paint to make it go a wee bit further. As it happened, he got away with this for some time. Eventually, the Presbyterian church decided to do a big restoration job on one of their biggest churches. Jack put in a painting bid, and because his price was so competitive, he got the job. And so he set to, with a right goodwill, erecting the trestles and putting up the planks and buying the paint, and yes, I'm sorry to say, thinning it down with some turpentine. Well, Jack was up on the scaffolding, painting away. The job was nearly done, when suddenly there was a horrendous clap of thunder. The sky opened up, and the rain poured down, washing the thin paint from all over the church and knocking Jack fair off the scaffold to the lawn. Now, Jack was no fool. He knew this was a judgment from the Almighty, so he fell on his knees and cried, "Oh God, forgive me. What should I do?" And from the thunder, a mighty voice spoke, "Repaint, you thinner, and go and thin no more." Bulletin bloopers. You like bulletin bloopers? I've made several of those at the moorings myself. The outreach committee has enlisted 25 visitors to make calls on people who are not afflicted with any church. Irving Benson and Jessie Carter were married on October 24th in the church, so ends a friendship that began in their school days. Barbara remains in the hospital and needs blood donors for more transfusions. She's also having trouble sleeping and requests tapes of Pastor Nelson's sermons. Miss Charlene Mason sang, "I Will Not Pass This Way Again," giving obvious pleasure to the congregation. Just a couple more, just a couple more. An engineer dies and reports to the pearly gates. St. Peter checks his dossier and, not seeing his name there, accidentally sends him to hell. It doesn't take long before the engineer becomes rather dissatisfied with the level of comfort there. So he begins to design and build improvements. Shortly thereafter, hell has air conditioning, flush toilets, and escalators. Needless to say, the engineer is a pretty popular guy. One day, God calls Satan and says, "How are things in hell?" Satan replies, "Hey, things are going great. We've got air conditioning, flush toilets, and escalators, and there's no telling what this engineer is going to come up with next." "What?" God claims. "You've got an engineer? That must be a mistake. He should never have been sent there. Send him to me." "Not a chance," Satan replies. "I like having an engineer on the staff, and I'm keeping him." God insists, "Send him back, or I'll sue." Satan laughs and answers, "Yeah, right. And where are you going to get a lawyer?" Oh, there's plenty in here about preachers, too, I believe. So, two old men had been best friends for years, and they both lived to their early 90s when one of them suddenly falls deathly ill. The other comes to visit him on his deathbed, and they're reminiscing about their friendship. When the dying man friends ask, "Listen, when you die, do me a favor. I want to know if there's baseball in heaven." The dying man said, "We've been friends for years. This I'll do for you," and then he dies. A couple of days later, his surviving friend is sleeping when he hears his friend's voice. The voice says, "I've got some good news and some bad news." The good news is that there is baseball in heaven. What's the bad news? The bad news is that you're pitching on Wednesday. There was a congregation that decided to have 4 worship services every Sunday. There was one for those new to the faith, another for those who liked traditional worship, one for those who had lost their faith and wanted to try and get it back, and yet another for those who had a bad experience with church and were complaining about it. They have names for each of the services, too. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. George Burns once said, "A sermon should have a good beginning and a good ending, and the two should be as close together as possible." Therefore, friends, the Easter laugh does not tell us to ignore the brokenness in the world. The Easter laugh doesn't tell us to ignore all the bad things in life and simply keep smiling. Instead, the Easter laugh is recognizing that just in the moment when defeat was a certainty, Christ pulled out the win. It's as though we were in the middle of a great baseball game with death. We're down by 3. In the top of the 9th, we have 2 outs already. Then God steps up to bat and hits a home run with the bases loaded. In that last possible moment, God wins the game. And what matters most, the game between life and death. And that huge upset is what inspires our Easter laughter. Let us pray. Loving God, you did and you do have the last word. You have overcome death so that we can overcome by faith and by your grace anything that we face in this world. Help us to hold on to that Easter laughter, not just on Easter Sunday, not just during Easter time, but every day. Help us to know the joy that you bring us, a joy that is complete in you. Help us to always hold on to that if things aren't all right, it's not the end, because in the end, everything